want to move forward in this particular event, but I would just like to say this. I have a kind of a small information or message to our distinguished audience from the community of foreign nationals. Some of them have been ably represented here by the leaders of their organizations. And the message is simple. They would like to keep this memory alive. So we are requesting that the representative has asked me to tell you that they will need a kind of a group photograph with you before you leave so that we can, begin to refresh our memories. And yeah, so I would just want the leaders of the various organizations after the minister's speech to just go and see Mr. Ramadan at the back. Mr. Ramadan is standing. So just to organize ourselves to have a good photograph with our speakers. The speaker. Yes, so the group photograph is going to be up here. So we have the names of those leaders of organization. Everything is organized, so it's not going to be everybody, but each organization have the right to have one representative to come up, and then we take the group photograph. Thank you. Yes, we want to move forward now, and as I call on our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Fanie Toit is the Executive Director, Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Dr. Fanie, please, I just want to ask that you make it very snappy. Thank you.
Program Director, Premier Zille, Deputy Minister Chowan, and Program Director, thank you for the opportunity. I shall be snappy, very snappy indeed. I think it's that time of day and we've heard a lot already. My name is Fanie Toit, as you've heard. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation that came out of the TRC process. That was itself a snapshot of the kind of damage that was wreaked upon our society by apartheid. I was in Addis Ababa as the violence broke here. And for the first time since 1990, I traveled on a South African passport without a sense of pride. I got to the border post there, and I knew that a lot of my fellow passengers on the plane were Ethiopians returning home, fleeing my country, because they no longer felt welcome there. The next day, the main newspaper in Addis Ababa, the front page, the entire front page was taken up by a photograph, a color photograph, of Ethiopians coming back and being entertained by government, celebrating their return, almost like a prodigal sons and daughters, back to Ethiopia, coming back from South Africa. Having said that, and the anger in society there was tangible when we walked around, and the irony was I was there to meet with the UN and the African Union on issues of social cohesion, and the irony did not escape any of us. But having said that, my perception was also that the anger somewhat subsided when the South African government came out with some strong measures and an interministerial task team. Some argue belatedly, but at least it was, the perception was created that the South African government is serious about it now that it has erupted. My view is that it has dealt our ambitions on the continent a significant blow. And we need to take that seriously. But not only our image on the continent, I think it also cuts to the quick of what we're trying to do with our project of social cohesion in South Africa. I think it says more about who we are than about who any of these foreign people are, so-called foreign people. It says more about South Africans themselves. And I think as such, the entire society, those of us in the affluent neighborhoods, and in the communities where life is hard, we need to take responsibility for xenophobia. It is not a poor problem. It's a problem of South Africa as an entire society. And as an entire society, including government, including civil society, that often carries our wounds very visibly around with us, we ought to take responsibility. For a while, we've been, at my institute, been writing about the lack of social cohesion in South Africa, and the trends are not good. The trends are negative. But it was our sense that on the political agenda in South Africa, reconciliation and social cohesion have been relegated down the priority list as other more hard issues appeared, economic development and so on. I would suggest it's right back up there as a priority in this country now. How we go about fostering social cohesion in this country. Trust in government has dropped by 25 percentage points over the last period. The least trusted sphere of government is local government. There's a worrying tendency amongst some of our communities to forget how bad apartheid really was. Because if we forget that, we cease to understand ourselves. And there's a worrying trend also that most South Africans sees inequality as the number one obstacle to reconciliation. We also need to acknowledge as South Africans, I think that many of the subtle stereotypes that supported apartheid edifice still circulate in our communities, in the form of stories about others that are unsupported. But these stories of racism, of xenophobia, and so on, form the quiet backdrop of the justification why violence so quickly erupts when it does. And so we need to confront those stereotypes. It's also in South Africa's interest to address xenophobia right head on. We cannot be the country we want to be without a full integration in the region. And on this basis, I would like, in the presence of our Premier and also the Deputy Minister, and I'm sorry that former Deputy Minister Fransman is not here, because I think there's important implications also for work in our international relations. I'd like to make a few proposals. The first is that we need to acknowledge at this point that we are an angry nation. We are angry. And that anger is coming out. And anger can be a good thing when it's dealt with productively. It can also be a very destructive thing. We need to handle our anger, acknowledge our anger, and handle it productively. We need to understand that the trauma of the past is sitting in our societies at every level, in every community. It's probably therefore not a very good idea to traumatize more people with midnight rates. It's probably not a good idea for us to act in a violent manner. We need to be the solution we would like to see. I think it's important that we make sure that we have accurate analysis and data to our disposal. We still come up with very dubious data sets. I think we've already spoken about the immigration policy. Foreign policy, I think this underscores South Africa's ambition to be a peacemaker on the continent very strongly. I think that's a correct policy development as far as civil society goes, and there's so many of us out there, but let me speak for myself. I think this is a fantastic and important initiative. And we need to build stability. And we see now for the first time also African presidents convening, expressing openly their worry about what's going on in a country such as Burundi, making suggestions of postponing those elections. I think that's a very positive leadership that is being shown there. Let me close with two comments, and I hope this is still snappy. The first is on communities. I believe communities is where the solution is. Communities are resilient, and our institute gives a Reconciliation Award every year. 3 years ago, 2008, we gave it to Masiphumelele community. Premier will recall that that community, first there was a violent eruption of xenophobia. Then community leaders stood up and said, this is wrong. We're going to apologize, and we're inviting people back into the community. They repatriated some property, and we thought that's the kind of leadership. So not everything is bad in our communities. There's a lot that works, and we need to find out what works and work with communities so they become more resilient. Finally, on business, let me just say I don't think it can be left unsaid also. The role of business, the important role of business. But we are a cash-rich business sector in this country. More cash rich than Brazil. More cash rich even than Russia. We have deep pockets. I'm not seeing that cash work sufficiently enough for social cohesion and stability in this country. And in the end, if you save lots of pots of money, but the ground disappears under your feet, then that pots of money will also disappear. So I think it's in business interest to become more strategic in supporting social cohesion programs and reconciliation programs in our communities. And if we can get also that message through, that business, successful as it may be, is dependent on social stability in this country for its work, I think we would have done well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making it snappy, really. Thank you. Another very short information is also to please be informed that the photograph is going to be taken before the questions and answers, right? So as to allow for our audience to have some time to relax before they leave.